Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Arie Trouw. He's the co-founder of XYO Network. Arie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm excited to be back on here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you back on the show. It's been about a year and a little bit since we last chatted, and I'm really curious to know what you're up to. And there's a ton of stuff that I want your thoughts on. But maybe before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
I've been writing software for a long time. I'm a technologist and dataist, fundamentally, but I love starting companies and creating solutions also. So, I've been doing this for 30 years, I guess it is at this point. I'm getting pretty old, but
That's awesome.
it's really my only thing in life is making cool solutions and trying to solve large problems.
Very cool. So walk us through maybe your career, just some highlights along the way, and then let's dive into what you're working on today.
Okay. Well, historically, I was a software engineer, so I went to college. I moved to California when I was about 26. My wife was about 7 months pregnant with our first daughter, so she wasn't so happy about that. But we moved to California because I wanted to be in the industry where there was software. In New York at the time where we were living was much more like finance and a lot of those things. There wasn't a huge entrepreneurial scene there. So I moved to Southern California and wanted to get a lot of experience in the small company entrepreneurial world. Did that here under a couple of great mentors that I had, and became a consultant after that, just so I could kind of build up a nest egg to be able to take a pause from that and start companies. And you get kind of you save up money, you start a company, you fail, rinse and repeat until you succeed, and then that's kind of what I did.
No, very cool. So walk us through what you're doing today, because it's really timely, I think, with what's happening kind of on the web and the internet in general right now.
So I've been working on XYO for the last almost 5-6 years now, and we're really focusing on the data of cryptography and the internet. And it's really important for us to understand why we have data and what's going on. We see a lot of the warts that's appearing nowadays. You have deep fakes, you have AI, you have all these different issues. I think a lot of people are very aware of the problems, but the question becomes the solution in many cases. And so focusing on like how do we actually harness data in a safe way, and how do we do that? And to me, the most important things I kind of put it into three different words. There's sovereignty, there's provenance, and there's permanence. But I started using immutability actually instead of permanence, because immutability is actually more important, because permanence is almost impossible. The sun could expand and the earth goes away and it's gone. So immutability is important, where you can tell change or you can tell it deleted. But the sovereignty part is where it's very important for me to be able to do something like verify if something is true or not without having to go ask an authority. And that comes into, for example, if there's an article or a post or any sort of a datagram I'm looking at, if I can verify that without having to go and just either trust the source, which is the API I got it from, or go and trust a different source that's going to verify it for me, I feel a lot better about that. And then also, if I can tell actually where it came from, if I can see the records of where it was originated from, it's a lot more comforting as well, because this person sent it or that person sent it. And then the immutability is very important, because if a person changes or edits it, you want to know that happened, or something is gone there. So if you have those three things, to me, you've pretty much solved a lot of the problems you see today with AI, deepfakes, and all those sorts of things. How you make those three things happen is the hard part, right? It's
Sure.
and that's what we're working on is trying to make those three things look easy to the end user, but hard internally.
Okay, so how do you actually go about doing that with what you're building? Because to your point a second ago, that's extremely difficult for the user.
Yeah. So, well, the user experience, you don't want to change it. So we're trying to lean on a lot of the Web 2 user experiences. But there's a lot of things you can do that are sovereign. We actually have things nowadays that are sovereign already. Like for example, an SSL key, or or in the crypto world for a reason, an address. I can generate an address for Ethereum without having to ask permission or request one from somebody or apply for it. I just basically run an algorithm on my computer and I generate an address. So we have some sovereignty in that. So that's a really good example of sovereignty. Zero knowledge proofs are great examples of sovereignty also, where I can prove that there's something in a datagram without even seeing what's in the datagram itself. But those are also very difficult to come by. The zero knowledge proof, or say, the sovereign concept we lean on a lot, is hashing. So once you've hashed a piece of data, if a person changes it, that hash changes as well. So if you hash data and then take those hashes and you intertwine them in blockchains, if you change the hashes, the whole blockchain breaks and goes away. You see this with Bitcoin or Ethereum, where the previous block hash is the way that they link them together. So that's a sovereign concept there as well. So just like interweaving all these sovereign technologies through your system is how you make it where a person, without having to go and ask somebody else, can do something. And then there's also the question of intermediaries, right? Where if I want to be able to do something peer to peer, that's much more sovereign than if I have to go through a service in the middle. Like for example, Google Hangout is, Google can turn off my ability to have Google Hangouts, but if I have a peer to peer conferencing system, then I can have a conference with somebody without having to go through Google. So building those peer to peer technologies is the goal there. But then you have problems like ISPs, for example, don't let you open up ports and those things. So there are ways to do peer-to-peer technologies as well, and you have to lean on some of the current technologies that are out there to do it. But really, it's a collection of all those little itty-bitty pieces and making customers aware of which things they're doing, which are sovereign, and which things they're doing which are not sovereign, so they can pick appropriately.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems to me, and I always gauge this based on kind of my non-technical friends or kind of family members, when they start mentioning stuff, then I'm like, oh, okay, this is like a real mainstream kind of thing. So how do you like, or why do you think people are actually starting to really care about this stuff, other than kind of the people like you and me that have cared about this stuff for years?
Well, I think part of it is because people have been using the word sovereignty more and more in conversations. When I've gone to conferences this last year, I see people either giving talks or on panels using the word sovereignty, which makes me really happy because there's not a really any good words to describe that concept. People are kind of conflated with like freedom or agency or those things, but sovereignty is different. And I think the reason people are starting to look at that is because there's becoming more and more questions of truth, and is this person telling the truth, whether trusting countries, trusting companies, trusting politicians, and being able to verify it. Because even if you go and look at a website, for example, about like a fact-checking website, usually those are biased as well, so they're going to fact check it in a certain way. So if you could actually fact check something independently, that's a lot better than having to rely on somebody else fact checking it for you. And I think long term the goal would be for people to have their own AI, even for that reason, to help them fact check stuff
Yeah.
or to do things. So if I have AI that I've trained to do something with my data and with data that I want in there, I may trust that AI more than trusting a news outlet or a large company or a nation to tell me what the truth is. And so being able to have that autonomy is something which I think people want, because the trust has eroded a lot since, I'd say, the 70s and 80s, when Walter Cronkite was on TV and everyone just trusted Walter Cronkite, right? So
Yeah.
that trust has gone away, and people need a new way to be able to verify things, and there's not that many great solutions for that.
Yeah, that's fair. And so many people can get wrapped up in believing something that's not true, right? And they'll like literally die on that hill sometimes. And you're like, yeah, but if you actually go do your research, you can prove that that's not what is like made up, right? Or, and we've seen that a ton with certain types of the population. And I find even like really smart people that are very logical can get trapped in it as well, which I also kind of really find fascinating.
Well, I think that's one of the problems also you see with people arguing or disagreeing. Often people disagree about the answer, but they don't take the time to take the steps backwards and see, well, where do they agree? Because the only way to actually come to agreement on something is you first have to take steps backwards to find what your commonality is. If you can't find a commonality at all, you're never going to agree on anything. So
Yeah.
if you step backwards and you agree on a commonality, you can both agree that that's a fact. And then when you go forward, if you disagree on something being a fact, then whoever wants to assert that in the argument as being a fact or a reason why the argument should go a certain direction, it's on them to prove that the fact is true. I think a lot of people think that the way that you argue is I say something and it's up to you to prove me or my statement not true, that's not how it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
It's
Interesting.
I have to prove my statement to be true as opposed to you having to disprove me. Because a person will say something, completely the world's flat. You ask them, well, why do you say the world's flat? So, well, no one's ever proven to me it's not. But if everything is true until proven false, that's not science. That's not scientific
Right.
Scientific
Yeah.
method is you assume it's false until you can prove it's true, and that seems to have been lost by a lot of people.
No, I 100% agree. So I'm curious, I want to dive a little bit deeper into XYO and how do people actually leverage what you're building with what they're building?
So the idea of XYO is a protocol, like many of these things, and so there's certain rules of how it works. And the primary concept in XYO is proof of origin chains. So we make these blockchains, kind of like an Ethereum blockchain, but they're not shared ledgers. Most people are more familiar with the shared ledger concept of Bitcoin or Ethereum, but that's very inefficient because everybody has to verify the same blockchain. Everybody stores the same data on there. It becomes exorbitantly expensive. So what we do is a form of a tangle where each person has their own blockchains and each person has their own thing. So, for example, a person can fire up our website and on their computer, and when they do that, it starts up a node in their browser actually, which can connect to other nodes. But it first and foremost it runs independently. It makes its own blockchain. It stores its own things, and then if somebody else wants to look at that structure which it made is verifiable based on my public address. So I say, hey, I made this whole bunch of data here and I signed all these in this structure. If I give you the hash of the tail of that blockchain, then the rest of it basically can't be changed. I can go and give it to you later on. And for example, I can even not show you the data of some of these blocks. I can have blocks in there where I've never shown you the data, but I've just shown you the hash. And then later on, if I need to prove what was in that block, I can show you the data that made that hash because it's really difficult to manufacture false data that matches a hash after the fact. So it's really used more in like an independent system basis, and then those systems can talk to each other without having to trust each other because they can verify the data via those signatures.
Okay, very cool. Can you give us maybe some use cases that people have leveraged your tech to actually use? Like, I think people could probably think of some, but can you give us some?
Well, some of the simplest ones are, for example, if I want to take the prices of Uniswap tokens or other coins out there and record those somewhere and then give you an answer of over time. Being able to store those in a way where there's a history of those and you can see that data whenever you want to, and what are we basing our answer of our trajectories on. And that's a very simple case where you have the origin and the provenance of that data. Like where did it come from? Did it come from a centralized API? Did it come from Uniswap? Did it come from those different things? And so you merge them into one thing. So that's a sample app that we have on our website where it shows how it's being used. Things that are being worked on now, there's, for example, having conversations, whether it's like a communications channel like a Twitter or like an email thread, where if you're speaking to somebody, you can verify it's coming from that person because that person's signature is on there, and they can also verify that they haven't removed anything from that chain. So
Hmm.
secure communications is something which is we're very interested in, and we definitely have some people working on that right now as a solution that they're using our technology for to be able to basically prevent AI or deep fakes from being put in there where a person's confused. Even in email, where how do you know where the email came from? There are some technologies like DMARC and DKIM, if you're familiar with those, that already
Yeah.
kind of help you do that. But if you have a blockchain along with that, you also get the sequence stored there permanently as well. And so, um, even delivery systems, for example, where did your package get to? And if each of the warehouses it goes near signs the blockchain, then it's there, and you can verify it independently. So we've done projects like that as well.
Interesting. So because like phishing and stuff has become so popular, whether it's email or text or whatever, is there like a way then that like companies could build that, say, in their email clients, where it says like this is verified to be like actually from your email, or sorry, your like phone company, or this is from this company and this company and this company, like into just like a regular email client, like your Gmail client or something? Because some of these attacks are getting like very good, and you click on a link and you give somebody full control of your computer or your device or whatever. Like, or is that just kind of a little bit like fear mongering, and that's not really an issue for most people? Or where are we kind of at with that? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Well, I think that's becoming more and more common, especially in the crypto space, because people, it's hard to claw back, a transaction that you didn't mean to send. But
Right.
also in other financial fraud situations, people are doing this all the time. And the simple solution from a technological standpoint is, like DMARC on email works that way, where there's a public key that's stored in DNS that the email client like Gmail can go verify that this email actually, gets signed by the server that this DNS says should have signed this thing before it came to us. So they can filter that out. But the problem is people are easy to socially engineer. So
Yeah.
like, I've seen like phishing scams where they just did a really good job of making the email look like a bank. Say it's a Wells Fargo email or whatever it is. It looks just like it and everything. But if you just took the time to look at the from email, it's like Wells Fargo at gmail.com or something like that. It's not even, they're not trying to
Yeah.
spoof the domain for Wells Fargo. They're just relying on the fact that a person's going to look at that and they're very familiar with the way the email looks because they've gotten them before from the same company, that they skip checking those other things. So that's where it becomes difficult. Where how does Google verify the content of that? To Since it's not coming from that domain, they can't say, well, did this domain sign it, because it didn't have to sign it. So you kind of need AI
Yeah.
for that, where the AI will look at that and be like, well, this is something which, if I were a human, I would think is a Wells Fargo email, even though it came from some completely random thing, like a Gmail account or whatever it is. Maybe I should flag that. So email specifically is a difficult solution or a difficult problem to solve because of the fact that people verify emails primarily through familiarity and like what they see in the email and how it's rendered, not through things like the source email address or the domain it came from or the signature. So getting people to change their behavior, or at least clients to make it more, you know, obvious to a person that this is potentially not from the place that they wanted to come from, makes it harder for them to be socially engineered. But there's a case recently where they did a whole deep fake where they mimicked an entire board of directors of a company video conference to get somebody to send a bunch of crypto. I think it was somewhere. Like, that's
Yeah, I
pretty
saw
pretty
that. Yeah.
involved, and
Yeah.
getting people not to fall for the things which their brains gotten so used to verifying, like like the fact that I'm almost 100% certain I'm talking to Kevin right now, but you
Yeah,
could
I
be an
guess.
AI
Yeah,
generated
that's interesting.
video over there that's not even you.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's like, well, and you could correct me if or you have a different opinion on this, but it's almost up to software vendors to implement as much of these measures as possible. I'm not saying it's not incredibly challenging. It's probably easier than trying to get to change user behavior, especially people that have been doing it for a long period of time. It's not going to be perfect, but I think AI and blockchain playing together can at least help to verify certain things, and it's maybe up to the software vendors to actually implement that instead of trying to change the user behavior. Is that, or what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think that's, like, for example, if you were to put a big banner on the top which like says like the domain it came from, like, take Gmail. If it had
Yeah.
a domain source on there, it's like this came from Gmail, this came from wellsfargo.com, this came from wherever it was, that'd probably be much more likely for a person to be able to determine, like, why did this Wells Fargo email come from Gmail? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But they make it small and kind of in gray because people don't like that. Like, users don't want to see a giant thing that was telling you where it comes from the domain, because it doesn't help them at all normally. It helps them in the case where they're being scammed, but normally it's like, why are you wasting all this time and just showing me the domain of the thing? A place where I think they've done a good job with that is to lock icon in browsers, where
Yeah.
people have gotten used to now saying, well, there's no green lock there, or there's a red lock that's unlocked and says, it's the wrong domain for the thing. So they've conditioned people to check to see what it says in the header there, on whether or not
That's
it's actually a
interesting.
safe
Yeah.
place to go. But they don't have the equivalent for email.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, and I'm just trying to run through my head just like other apps that are outside of email that, yeah, you're right. Like if you put up a banner saying like this might be fraudulent, like eventually people would just be like, well, I see that all the time, it's probably fine. Like,
Yeah.
right, where you'd have to get them to be that like lock thing where people are like, oh, that's actually like an issue, right? Because they don't see it, like where email's bad because you get most people I think get so many spam messages, right? And you'd be constantly seeing that banner, which is interesting. But you want to see that banner because getting hacked or like getting your credit card hacked, like it's a monumental task of like trying to get back your money and update everything across the web. Like it's a huge pain, right? But we're willing to sacrifice convenience sometimes for that. Yeah, that's interesting.
So it's kind of a two-part solution. Companies like ours need to provide the tools and the technology and the cryptography to be able to solve the problem. But then the companies which are providing the front ends and the UIs and the solutions also need to make sure they expose that to the user. A good example is I don't use Telegram at all, because on Telegram, if I go on any Telegram channel, the next thing I know, there's like 4 Aries on there, and they're all asking for people to send them XYO or something like that. And it's really hard to tell which one's me and which one's real, because you can just change your username to whatever you want to. Where if you go on like Slack, for example, it's a lot harder to mimic me. It's still possible, but it's a lot harder to mimic me. Or if or even on Twitter for that reason, I'm at Arie Trouw. So somebody else could probably be like at Arie Trouw1 or whatever it is, blah blah blah. But it's a lot harder to mimic me. Where on like Telegram, they've designed their UI where the actual username that's actually going to differentiate me from somebody else is so hidden that no one notices it.
Right. Yeah, that's no, that's a really good point. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into more of what you and the team are building, because it it's actually really innovative, and I think people tie blockchain to crypto and NFTs, and there you can use them together, but they're completely separate of each other. So where are we kind of at, and what exactly are you building, and how could people just like leverage what you're building with or without kind of crypto and NFTs? Because I think people still tie those things together, and it's not really fair to do that. And I think with what's happening with crypto lately, especially NFTs, people are just like, oh, that's garbage, nobody uses that anymore. It's like, no, 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 there's a lot of good uses for it, and a lot of people are using it, and a lot of people that are being negative about it are using it every day and they don't even know. Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, NFTs are one of those things where it's like the fundamental technology for it is really pretty cool and amazing. It's just people,
Totally.
the whole speculative tulip market aspect of it is kind of really tainted it for many people out there. Like I would even argue that the datagrams that we have inside of XYO, where you have data with a hash and that's stored, is in a weird sort of way an NFT. It's a non fungible piece of data. It's not really a
Sure.
token as such,
Interesting.
but it's each one's unique, so they're non fungible. You don't have like 40 different copies of the exact same piece of data. They each have their own hash, and they can even assign ownership to them if you want to. So in a weird sort of way, we
Hmm.
kind of use NFTs conceptually as the building block for how we store data in our system. But it's not. There's no like marketplace for our NFTs. So there's no value for it. So people don't
Right.
buy them and speculate on them, which is a completely different concept there. But what we're trying to build right now is we're going to be coming out with a thing we call XYOS, which is a layer which you run on top of your node. So when you're running an XYO node, this is the UI for it. It's kind of like GNOME or KDE that you would have on Linux. And so it's a UI, and you can make it a lot easier for users to be able to use something that's peer-to-peer and sovereign without even realizing how it's working underneath it and how we're using blockchain and cryptography to actually accomplish that. So, in that case, I could put photos on there, and then if somebody were to connect to my node on my computer, I can approve their address, and if they're a friend of mine, I can say, well, you can see these photos, but the photos only exist on my computer. They don't get stored in the cloud somewhere or potentially deleted. You could back them up if you want to. You could use a cloud archivist to store them in our system, but without that, it's just peer to peer. It's a completely sovereign system. So I can share pictures, I can share comments or notes or documents with people in a completely peer to peer situation, which is very similar to me as the early days of the internet, where I would have my own web server, my own email server at home, and you'd have your email server at home, and they just kind of talk to each other, on Web 1.0 terms. But with Web 2.0, that sovereignty and that peer to peerness has gone away. So our XYO OS, or XYOS, as we call it, is really a way for people to be able to easily use solutions and applications that, or dApps that do peer-to-peer sovereign concepts for them and really illustrate the power of XYO.
Okay, very cool. So how do people actually go about leveraging the technology, and how are you helping kind of blockchain developers and people that are looking to become blockchain developers?
Well, we have a bunch of SDKs. So we have, our
Okay.
primary SDK is written in TypeScript and JavaScript. So that's where the majority of people were to use it there. And they can use it from as little as just the raw protocol, where it does the payloads and the bound witnesses for you. Or we also have React SDK. So if you want to make a website that uses our system to be able to store stuff, and render things, do all that, you can also use our React wrappers for it. One of the cool things that our system also does, kind of as a side effect, which I like a lot, is the fact that you can make a true, like, sovereign single page app, where it's or a web app, where when how on Google Mail, like, if you disconnect from the internet, it can still, like, you can author a piece of mail, and it
Yeah,
sits there in the queue, and the next time you connect, it actually will send it. So our system, because we use IndexedDB on the browser to actually have an archivist there, so we have a local archivist to store stuff. You can completely use our system without the internet in a browser, and then when you
that's
connect to the
cool.
internet, it then starts, like, going again and transferring data, and then when you stop, it's still there. So being able to make a application or some sort of a solution that really wants to work offline and work sovereignly is something which is hard to do for most people, where we make it way easier, because it's kind of plug and play way of making um, a local only or local first website.
No, makes a lot of sense. Can you give us some use cases of maybe customers that have leveraged that? Like, why would they want to potentially do that? Obviously, like, the obvious ones are if people are traveling or on an airplane or something like that. But what other use cases have you seen with that feature and functionality?
Well, an interesting use case is games, right? So
Sure.
if you play like World of Warcraft way back when,
Yep. Yep. I
if
did.
you lose connection to the server, after about 10 steps, the thing stops, and it's like, oh, you can't keep on going, because they can't trust anything that comes from your computer, because you could be, speeding up your character, or you could be, teleporting to different places. You could be cheating in the game. So really, the game in that case runs on their server, and you just have like a thin client, kind of like a mainframe with a thin client viewing the game. And as soon as that link goes away, it stops. But with our technology, what you can do, like, for example, a card game, what we've done is, if I pick 10 cards, and then you pick 10 cards, we can then exchange hashes of what our 10 cards are. So
Interesting.
now
Yeah.
we've both, like, locked in what our hands are, and we can go ahead and play that. But I can spend as much time as I want to make my cards. I don't have to go and make my hand on a server. We can independently play a turn without being online. So it really, besides allowing you to work offline, it also allows you to offload a lot of the work to the client. And it's kind of like the boomerang effect, where, like, throughout the history of computer science, we've gone between thin client and thick client and thin client and thick client. And I think it's really time for it to go back to thick client, as opposed to being this thin client thing where you just log in and you look at your Facebook stuff on Facebook, or that sort of a thing. This also allows for, like, AI, for example. If I want to have a bunch of data that's on my computer that I don't want to share necessarily with OpenAI or Microsoft or whoever, I can actually have that data used as a learning set on my own computer. I can share the learning set if I want to afterwards, but the data I train it on, I don't have to go and share it with everybody else. So, but besides the sharing and the privacy aspect, it's just not feasible for any of these companies to build data centers large enough for everybody's learning sets to be crunched by all these different GPUs to be able to learn on them. So distributing that to all the different thick clients is a lot better.
Interesting. No, that's actually like a really fascinating use case. Well, and even just the cybersecurity angles that could come with too, right? Like just is got to be almost unlimited. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, it's the first step to not having your data stolen or hacked is not having it on somebody else's server. There's a saying in crypto, uh, what was it? Not my storage, not my keys, or where basically it's like, yeah, if you have a cloud wallet, for example, where somebody else has access to your private key, it's like
Yeah.
effectively it's or it's not my crypto, not my keys, not my crypto. But it's like you're not sure that that's not going to get stolen or taken or whatever it is. And so even like look at FTX. Like, if you
Yep.
deposited your money in FTX, it's not really your crypto. So somebody else owns it, and they promise to give it back to you, sort of a thing. Where if I have it in a cold wallet, for example, like I know that's safe there. So the easiest way to not have people access your data or take your data is to not socialize it. And so if you want to store, one of the use cases I was talking about recently, which I thought was really cool, is for AI. If you want to be able to have it trained on all of your behaviors and all of your idiosyncrasies and all like who you are, so it knows how to answer questions for you.
Yeah.
What you really want to do is put a camera on your head and have it observe you 24 hours a day. Now, do you want to have video and audio of you 24 hours a day on somebody's cloud server? Probably not.
No. Yeah.
Um, but you want
Fair
your
enough.
AI, which is learning from you, to actually observe all those things. So, like how you wash yourself in the shower is probably something the AI should learn, so it knows which soap to order for you from Amazon. But it's something which you want to keep local. You don't want to have to upload that to have somebody go and learn off of that to give you a better AI assistant, for example.
Yeah, that's actually really fascinating. I think, well, since we last chatted, AI has obviously been around for a number of years, but it's kind of become mainstream because of the chat GPTs of the world and a few others. But how do you think that AI is really kind of going to change the internet and just jobs in general based on what you're seeing out there?
Well, I think it's already changed the internet and jobs in general quite a bit. So obviously, it's even better way to search the internet. I use ChatGPT to find out things about code or various questions where it's a lot faster for it to come up with those answers than for me to go and try to use Google and
Yeah.
comb through the different sources that are out there. I think students are using it a lot more for research and being able to write papers. They're even cheating by using it to write the entire paper for them in some cases, which has changed that. I think that's also happened in jobs where the efficiency of many people have gone up substantially because they can use that. Or even in some cases, if you're a small company, as an entrepreneur, one of the difficult things is you only have 3 or 4 people, and you all need to be able to do 10 people's jobs. And so to go out and hire a specialist that's like a copywriter, for example, used to be a requirement. Now it's like, well, I can just use ChatGPT as a requirement. It's not as good as that copywriter, but it's 80% as good, and I can't afford the copywriter, and it's way better than I am. So for all the tasks that you're not an expert at, having ChatGPT be the next best thing is hugely important, and I think a lot of companies are doing that now. That's why I think we're seeing some interesting changes in employment structures at companies where I think the focus of where they're hiring has changed in many cases because there's certain roles that can be 80-90% replaced with ChatGPT and certain roles which can't be. So I think that's already happening. I think the biggest place where it's still going to happen is the personal AI, where it's your own personal assistant. It's even mimicking yourself and being able to have kind of like the Harry Potter painting, where you have the painting that speaks to you, right? It's like you take a photo and then it's sitting there, but you can ask it questions, and it's actually a 3D version of myself who can interact with you as if it's real. Those sorts of
Yeah.
solutions are going to be fascinating to me.
No, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because like I moved away from Google for probably 90% of my search. I just my default search engine now. It actually goes to Perplexity, which is another chatbot for people that haven't heard of it. But it's the same concept. Like you use ChatGPT, like using that. But if you would have asked me like 6 months or a year ago, I'd have been like, no, probably not. But like now it's like I use that probably 90+% of my time compared to just like where you'd just be Google searching constantly and trying to find stuff. And sure, it might take a second longer to get results, but it's pretty close majority of the time, right? Of what you're looking for without having to go through 10 links or a couple links, right?
Well, it's actually net it's faster because yes, each result's faster with Google, but if you have to search 10 times or you have to go and
Yeah,
figure out if it's the correct one, the time from question to answer is faster with the AI search engines basically.
totally. So, do you think it's really going to change how developers develop and blockchain and just kind of in general, or where do you think that kind of some of these tech jobs are going to go with AI?
Well, I think it's like any career. It gets eaten up from the bottom up, not from the top down.
Yeah.
And so, a mediocre or a really poor engineer who's just basically cutting and pasting code and making a website for somebody that practically you can make in Wix, those jobs are going to go away first because it's probably already the case where AI can probably do a better job than that guy because he's just not that good at his job. Where if you start asking, well, AI, well, like how should you architect something, or how do you improve the efficiency of something, or optimize those? It gets more and more difficult. So, but I think the problem is there's, especially in the software engineering world, there's it's a pyramid, right? There's the even though you think of the bottom 25% of software engineers as from a quality standpoint or from a skill set standpoint, should I say, as being 25%, but it's probably more like 75% of software engineers fall in the bottom 25% of quality. And then you have the better and better ones on there. So you have maybe 75% of the software engineers at risk of being displaced by ChatGPT. Or even in the cases where, like for me, I probably would hire less junior software engineers because I can have ChatGPT do the job for me, or like where I would normally just say, oh, I got this repetitive task, I'll have the junior guy do it. Now I can just have ChatGPT do it for me. So all the industries are going to, I think, have this bottom up kind of cannibalization where like you lose the less experienced and less skilled people, and I think it's also going to make it more difficult for people out of college to get that experience that they need to be
Yep.
in the top of the pyramid. So I think it's both a pruning of the current workforce, but also I think it's a barrier for the future workforce, which is probably a bigger concern for me.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. So, for somebody that's kind of coming out of school, what advice do you give to them so they hopefully can get that kind of first job or second job when they're kind of a junior?
I think a lot of it is just you have to hone your skills. You have to get good at it. You have to, and if you can find a mentor that's willing to work with you, that's the best thing. And another thing which also makes it worse is the work from home situation we have now after COVID. It's a lot harder for a junior engineer or a junior employee of any sort to actually learn from a mentor when they're working remotely. So you have
Yeah,
to find a mentor
it's interesting.
that you can work in the same office at and learn from them. But that's difficult because that time is something which those mentors only have so much of. So they're going to try and pick the best and the brightest to work with. So it's difficult. It used to be kind of like you go to any college in the United States, you get your 4 year degree in computer science, and you're guaranteed a near six figure salary graduating. I don't think that's going to be the case 10 years from now. I think it's going to be much more of a struggle for people. I think it's the same thing that you had with doctors. Doctors used to be the 70s. You get your MD. You're going to be a millionaire by the time you're 50, right? Which back then $1 million was a lot of money too. But nowadays, there's plenty of doctors that they probably make the same amount of money as software engineers do because
Or less sometimes.
or less. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been commoditized in many ways. So I think software engineering is really going through that same phase that it's been due for that, and I think we have to some degree an overpopulation of software engineers. But at the same time, I would say that people should learn how to write JavaScript or how to do software engineering type things because it helps you in other jobs. Like if you're a content writer or a marketer, being able to know how to write JavaScript things to be able to cut and paste your pixels and put them
Yeah.
into websites is a skill. So I think software engineering to some degree is going to, for many people, move from being a vocation to being a skill that they need for other
Interesting.
jobs.
That's actually really interesting. Yeah, I will say, as like somebody that's been a designer basically my whole career, just the no code tools or low code tools have been an absolute game changer for me, right? Where I don't even need really a developer now to build an MVP, maybe a crude V1 of, something like an idea, where before, I could maybe struggle through it for months at a time, but it just, you usually lose interest in the project before you launch, right? Where now we're talking days or weeks, you can have something where it would take me years maybe to get something up, right? In kind of my spare time. And so I think even just leveraging some of the AI tools as you're going up, and like I've been leveraging a bunch of like the tools even on the design side, like even to generate some ideas quick or test some heat mapping ideas or just do some certain things that almost gets you even 20, 40, 60, 80% through something, right? So I think leveraging that, especially early on in your career, or if you've been at it a number of years, has really been helpful to me.
Mhm. Well, I think it's really important also for people to know what the AI is doing, because that's one of the things that often
Yeah.
you see, people they use those, as you say, the no code or low code tools, but they don't understand like CSS, for example, at all. So
Yeah.
it's like when something goes wrong, they're like, well, they don't know how to fix it. They don't understand what went wrong. So I think it's still important for people to have a limited understanding of what's actually happening under the covers when the tool's doing something for you. So when something goes wrong potentially, or at least it helps you understand why something may not be possible. You feel like, well, I'm trying to do this and it's not working for some reason. Well, if you understand what it's trying to do, you'll know why it's not working. If you just try it a different way, perhaps it'll work. So I don't think those tools preclude a person from having a cursory understanding of how technology works. It just precludes them from having to be an expert at those. And that's kind of what I was saying before. Like I don't have to be an expert at copywriting. I can use ChatGPT to copyright for me better than I can copyright, because that's a skill which I would not say I'm, the top 10% person of. So, especially for the skills where, it really, I think, allows people to focus on their expertise and then still get, 70, 80% quality out of their non-expertise that's on it.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting way to put it. So I'm curious, I want to talk a little bit more about, is there any other features of the platform that we haven't really covered today that, people could leverage in their apps or their current apps or their new apps? And then kind of how easy is it to get started with an app that I've maybe had for a number of years?
Well, we're launching our the XYO thing I was talking about before, and we're launching our builder program at the end of the quarter. So that's probably the best time for a person to start using this, because it does two things. It gives you the SDKs and the tools to be able to build things. But one of the difficulties we've had with developers is it's kind of hard for a person to try it out. It's kind of like asking a person to write an iPhone app without an iPhone. And so now with the
Yeah,
XYOS,
interesting.
it gives you like a little test environment where it's like, oh, you can write this app and do something, but you can just pop it into our XYOS node and you can see it running right away. And so it really gives you a test environment as well as like a user's environment. So that's why we've kind of been dragging our feet a little bit with the builder program to get it out when a person actually has a way to more easily test something. It's kind of like the Ganache and Truffle suite that they have for Ethereum. Because
Yeah.
before that, if you tried to write smart contracts before you had Truffle and Ganache, it was really difficult, right? So we're kind of in that stage, where yes, it's all technically there. If a person understands how to do it, and we can walk them through it, but it takes a lot of hand holding from us to have a partner actually build something, which we've gone through that experience, which is one of the reasons why we're trying to build the tools and the dev environments to be able to have people more easily create something that has an immediate feedback loop for them. That's awesome. It's like, they can spend a few hours and build something that runs and is cool and they can share with their friends.
No, makes a lot of sense. So, and there's probably mixed opinions on this, but like how much of a product should you potentially put on the blockchain from day one? Should all of it, some of it, depends on the feature set, or what's your thoughts around that?
I think that's a really difficult question. It's because the problem is if you're an absolutist and you say, well, I'm gonna put everything on Ethereum, you're gonna end up with people having to pay hundreds of dollars, per minute or whatever it is to be able to run your
Yeah.
software. It's just not practical. So conceptually, like I would say, like you want to put as much as you can on the blockchain because it's nice, but really, I think what it comes down to is you have to figure out, well, which things benefit from it and which things don't, because having something that's running on a shared ledger that's centralized like that, or it's got that pinch point. That's not important. Like for example, you wouldn't render your. I've seen people actually make rendered things through blockchain. I think it was an EOS app that was Space Invaders, and the entire Space Invaders engine was running on EOS. It was a really cool like tech demo. But what you really just want is you potentially just want to store the high scores. Yeah, maybe it's just the high scores
Yeah.
you want to put there, or you want to put the seeds for the randomizer of the game on blockchain. So knowing which things are the best bang for your buck that you put on blockchain is, I think, the first step. And as blockchain gets more and more efficient, you can put more things there. Our goal at XYO, actually, one of the things is to make it so that our system, despite the fact that it's blockchain based and it works the way it does, is actually easier to use and more efficient and faster than like using Mongo an equivalent Web 2 solution. That's very difficult because it does more things. You have to sign things and you have to do additional work there. But we're much closer to that goal than a shared ledger like Ethereum or Bitcoin is, just because of the fact that we don't have to have
Hmm.
a whole bunch of parties do the same thing over and over and over again. So it's hard to know what that level is, but it's definitely not 100%.
Yeah. No, that I agree with that. That makes a lot of sense. So, how do you guys monetize the platform then?
So, well, right now we have the Coin app. It's really what our user first experience is, and a person can store their data on there and use that for basically producing data for our XYO network, and then they can get paid on there for that data by getting coin in the Coin app, and then they can redeem that for XYO. So that's kind of how it closes the loop, where we pay the consumers of our data, and then the consumers of our data end up paying them. So we have a cycle there of how the value goes into a circle. It's a great way also for us to onboard people onto crypto, which have not been using crypto before. It's a very easy to use app on a phone that people are very familiar with, and you don't have to have like a wallet to. It isn't like install the ETH client first, sort of a thing. It's much easier
Yeah.
than that. You can just kind of get started and then redeem from there. So that's really our path to getting people to be interested in there, and then from there transitioning them into XYO. So we make revenue from coin right now. That's kind of what our primary coin driver is. Our goal this year is to expand that to have a lot more revenue opportunities with the actual XYO network and people using that and some services that we're going to be launching for that as well.
Interesting. No, that makes a lot of sense. So, we're kind of coming to the end of the show, but is there anything else that you'd like to cover today that we haven't related to XYZ or XYO, or any other kind of advice you'd want to pass along?
Um, not really. XYO, I just think it's a very exciting project. I've been working on it for a long time. It's really a different way of looking at crypto and the benefits of it, as opposed to everyone's just trying to make the faster shared ledger or the more NFT. So I think that there's different ways to solve the goals of what the cypherpunks wanted. They wanted sovereignty. They wanted permanence and provenance and those sorts of things. So I think focusing on those is what makes us special, as opposed to focusing on trying to make an existing solution to those better or different or that sort of thing. So focusing on the goal of why we're trying to do it is important. I think that's what a lot of people should be looking at also when they look at different crypto projects is why are they doing it? What's the goal? What are they trying to achieve for that? What's the purpose of what they're doing? And so, we stand out that way. And also, we're a U.S. company and we're registered here in the U.S. We file twice a year as a company, that sort of a thing. So I think our transparency is something which is very interesting for compared to most of the market out there.
No, yeah, that's really interesting. I'm curious, where do you think the state of crypto and NFTs is these days, and do you think they're both going to become or like popular again, or like is it kind of all doom and gloom and it's going to go away?
I wouldn't say it's unpopular right now. Bitcoin's been doing well. They have the ETP out there, and so it's not. I wouldn't say it's people are that down on crypto at large. I think people are down on NFTs to some degree. I think we're basically in the same state, kind of where AI was before a couple of years ago when ChatGPT came out. I think
Yeah.
we need that killer solution. We need someone to could be like, hey, we've done this with crypto and it's really interesting. And now I understand why using crypto is better and different. And that's where I see XYO going with our XYOS, where a person can use that and they'll be like, oh, this is really cool. This is a great solution. I'm going to use this. And then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, I didn't even realize it's using crypto and it has all these other benefits as well. So getting a person to enjoy a solution
Yeah.
and
That's
then
interesting.
finding out that it's crypto and it has sovereignty and it has all those aspects, I think is the right way to go there, as opposed to, oh, this is really painful, but it's crypto, so just bear with me and deal with the pain, which is where I think a lot of the solutions are nowadays.
Yeah, that's actually really good advice. But how about we close the show with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself, XYO, and any other links you want to mention?
Yeah, well, go to xyo.network to be able to get information about what we're doing there, what our projects is. Obviously, you can find our token on Coinbase and on a variety of different things out there. We also have our stock is traded on XYLB on T0. I think we're the highest volume stock on there most days. So very excited about the wrap securities that T0 has been providing for us. So we're a publicly traded company from that standpoint, because it's considered over the counter. And then
Yeah.
also you can go to xylabs.com if you want to read more about the company behind xyo.network, and all of our corporate filings are there also available, and that sort of a thing.
Very cool, Arie. Well, I really appreciate you again taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day, man.
Thank you very much for having me on, Kevin.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com, and keep building the future.